Who is this Michigan State student from 100 years ago, and how have millions heard her words? What is this halfway rock? And would you take a sip from this drinking fountain? Mysteries, heroes, shenanigans, a tour by the archives of Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan, taking us back in time to the year 1900. Susan O'Brien, Jennie Rankin, Rebecca Yeoman-Stephenson, Megan Badgely-Malone, and Bill Castanier start us here at Beaumont Tower and Cowles Hall, the 1900 class fountain, the Union Building, the Deer Park behind Campbell Hall, the Memorial Grove of the Great War next to Williams, the President's House, and Roosevelt Elm near Gilchrest, and the Cowles House tree. June 10th, 2023, the Michigan State University Archives and the Historical Society of Greater Lansing present an informative and spirited tour of North Campus describing its history from 1900 to 1929.
Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. The university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. Do you guys all have the handout? Everybody has the handout. Today we're going to give you a tour of specific locations that are on the inside of this handout of Michigan Agricultural College between 1900 and 1929. This is a vast campus, as you all know, with a long history. So to make it doable, we confined both the scope and the time period. We've also given you a handout with maps, a map of 1899-1900 that you can refer to, and on the flip side of that is the 1927 campus map. So that helps you orient where you are in space and time. Oh, sorry about that. Are there any people that are first timers here to campus? Yay, welcome, welcome. Any alumni? All right, this will be your first Go Green. Right. Thank you. Any retirees? Excellent. I hope to be one of those in the next 5 to 10 years. Join your ranks. Let me introduce myself and my colleagues today. My name is Susan O'Brien. I'm a cataloging archivist. This is my colleague Jennie Rankin, our student worker extraordinaire, Rebecca Yeoman-Stephenson, and Megan Badgely-Malone over here was most recently a colleague, and she's just departed for greener pastures. What we do at the University Archives is preserve the history of this university. We preserve paper materials, we preserve audiovisual materials, and materials in our collections go back to a little bit even before the history of the university or when the university began. As you are all well acquainted, MSU was established in 1855 as a land grant university. So what does that mean? That means that this great place was founded to study agricultural in a scientific manner. So in practice, that enabled working class people, aka at the time farmers, to educate their children. Today we're going to introduce you to what campus was like between 1900 and 1929. World War I is going to feature in these stories because it lands right in the middle of that time period. And we're also going to introduce you to a few characters in the history of the university. I'm sure most of you have heard of Forrest Akers. How about F.I. Lanky? Oh, yeah, Jacob will know. President Jonathan Snyder and at least one of his children. And a U.S. president will also make a brief appearance today. So what was Michigan Agricultural College like in 1900? I can tell you there were 627 students enrolled.
In 1929, we had 2,891 students. If you count all the graduate, summer school courses, and the 18 short courses, that was 4,105 students enrolled.
In 1900, there were 23 graduates and 1 student earned a master's degree. 23 graduates.
In 29, we had 480 total graduates. That includes your bachelor's, and doctorate degrees.
Remarkably, Booker T. Washington was the commencement speaker in 1900.
The commencement speaker in 1929 was Dr. Paul Volcker, and he was president of the Battle Creek College. A little different.
Tuition was free for state residents in 1900.
And the same in 1929.
Notable campus improvements in 1900 were the completion of the Women's Building. The Women's Building was also known as Morrill Hall. How many of you took classes in Morrill Hall? It no longer exists. The parking lot that I parked in, and maybe some of the rest of you parked in, is now where Morrill Hall stood. The Dairy Building was also completed in 1900, and that is where Kedzie Hall is now. And a railroad extension from Trowbridge Road to, you can see on the map where it went. It was 1 3/4 miles long. It cost $1,000 to the college. And it was the significant part of that was that goods and services could be delivered more centrally to campus, and it also took some pressure off of the trolley system. So that's that. So.
Okay. And in the late 1920s, there were many construction projects. One of them was Demonstration Hall, the Kedzie Chemical Laboratory, and the one we are standing in front of now, Beaumont Tower. So just so you know, we do have some pictures. Megan and Rebecca will try to flash them for you guys so you just get an idea. We can pass them around after the presentation's completely done. But before we talk about Beaumont Tower, we have to talk about the building that stood on this site and why Beaumont Tower was dedicated in memory of College Hall. So the establishment of the Agricultural College of the State of Michigan happened on February 12, 1855. We've had 6 name changes for the university. The main ones are Michigan Agricultural College, MAC, Michigan State College, MSC, and then Michigan State University, MSU. So they'll get used interchangeably. So College Hall was the first building built on campus, and it was dedicated solely to the instruction of scientific agriculture. A member of the Michigan State Agricultural Society, a Mr. John Holmes, was tapped to design the building, but then they also didn't know, well, what are they going to teach? So they asked Mr. Holmes, hey, would you also build the course of study? And that helped, so he knew how to build the building. So College Hall was a one building. It was supposed to be a central building with 2 corresponding wings, but only the west wing got built. It cost $26,500, but that included both College Hall and Saints Rest, which was the dormitory first built on campus. Unfortunately, it was really poorly built. The foundation was built around a tree stump, and you can see it in the blueprint. So the administrators realized that the doors and the floors were uneven. The roof leaked really badly, and they already had to replaster the walls. There were limited windows for light and poor ventilation system. Dr. Beal complained that he had to move the classrooms around because there wasn't enough light for his students to use the microscopes. And then Dr. Kedzie of chemistry complained because of the ventilation, because some of the windows didn't open. So unfortunately, it was a very poorly built building. So College Hall was our first classroom. It had a library, the museum. It also had a chapel, and this is where the administrative offices were. Okay. Over time, College Hall just kept slowly deteriorating. And in comes a name you will know, John Beaumont. In 1914, he made a resolution to preserve College Hall, and he wanted it made into the Student Union building. But due to World War I going on, President Frank Kedzie asked for College Hall to be made into barracks instead. Work began, but it was immediately halted because the construction workers realized the bricks were hollow and there was no way that they could do the repairs they need to do to make College Hall safe. Fortunately, the building was vacated, it was empty, but on August 12, 1918, the west and south walls of College Hall came crumbling down. And within the rest of the week, the rest of the building was removed later. And we are going to introduce our first character.
Mr. Forrest Akers. Forrest Akers was born on a farm in Williamston in 1886, and Forrest was born on New Year's Eve. And I really think that this is going to give you an indication of how fun a guy Forrest Akers really was. Forrest attended Michigan Agricultural College from 1905 to 1908, and he was a forestry major. Forrest loved two things. He loved baseball and he loved pranks. He really, really, really loved to have fun on campus. He was the star pitcher on the baseball team, and there's a photo of the team that you can show. There is a photo. Oh, that's a, yep. Anyway, he's in the top in the middle. He was a tall guy. So during his brief stint as a student, it is alleged that he wrote an article in the Detroit Free Press. He was an intern, apparently. Now, this article you can find. We clipped it on newspapers.com, and there's no byline. It doesn't say written by Forrest Akers. But he wrote a candid bit about how unsafe College Hall was on November 10th, 1907, a full 11 years before it fell down. Now, the administration was not happy about this, and they suspended him. So, in baseball parlance, this is going to be Forrest's first strike.
It gets worse.
Yeah. So, you think, oh, okay, College Hall's come down. Now we're going to talk about Beaumont Tower. Well, we got to talk about another building first that was built right here, too. So, as soon as College Hall was cleaned up, an artillery shed / garage for 16 Army trucks was built on this site. Sections of the wall of College Hall were actually used in the construction of this garage. And this garage was built super fast because College Hall came down in August, and we have pictures 2 months later in October of people standing in front of the garage. And this outraged many alumni that the memory of their education that they so cherished was now being tarnished by a garage. And so eventually somebody that wanted to change that was John Beaumont. So John Beaumont was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey in 1858. He came to Michigan in 1875 and graduated from Mac in 1882. He studied law, was admitted to the bar in 1884, and went on to have a prestigious career practicing law in Detroit at the firm of Beaumont, Smith, and Harris. While also an alumnus, Beaumont also became a member of the State Board of Agriculture, what you would know today as the MSU Board of Trustees. He was a member from 1912 to 1921. And him and his wife Alice decided that they wanted to have a bell tower built and dedicated to College Hall. So now we're finally getting to the tower. So in the summer of 1928, the remnants of the shed and the College Hall foundation were completely removed. The cornerstone was laid on October 23rd, 1928, and Beaumont asked for 4 things to be included: the college annual from 1882, the Class Day exercise program held August 4th, 1882, the commencement program from August 15th, 1882, and a program from the 7th reunion of the alumni held August 16th, 1882. He graduated 1882, so it makes sense why he wanted those items included. Construction began in 1928 and it was completed in 1929. The dedication ceremony took place on June 22nd, 1929. Beaumont could not attend due to illness, and he only saw the bell tower once, and it was his last visit to campus in 1937, but he did listen to the radio when the bells were being played. So just some quick little factoids about Beaumont Tower. It was constructed in the style... Yep. It was constructed in the style of collegiate Gothic architecture, and the tower is 104.67 feet at its highest spire, and at the time it cost around $110,000. I said that right? Yeah. So yeah, you can. So the spire is on this side, and many people ask, what does it mean? We've heard the finger of God. What does it stand for? But it's just the architecture that was used at the time. So the sculpture that you see on the front of the tower is a sower, and the inscription reads, "Whatsoever a man soweth," and it's just the dedication to College Hall and the agricultural education that was first taught on this space. There's a lot more history to Beaumont Tower, but we are not going to go through the whole thing, but we are coming up on its 100th anniversary, so I'm sure in a few years there'll be a lot of more things to come.
I do want to say real briefly that I forgot to give our little disclaimer that we are not historians. We are archivists, and a lot of the stories that you'll hear today come out of reference questions that we get. We get reference questions from undergraduates, we get questions from graduate students across the globe. And I'm serious, across the globe, because the reach of this university does go around the globe. Much like, they used to say about the British Empire, MSU is pretty similar. We get questions from alumni. We get descendants of alumni on a daily basis. So a lot of times what happens is you'll get a reference question, and then we start to do a little research so we can answer the question, and then people like Jennie get very curious and start doing a lot of research, and then she writes a blog post. So on the back of the handout is our website, and we have a blog that Jennie frequently contributes to. She just recently did one about the 150th anniversary of the Rock. And these also will get picked up by MSU Today if you get those emails. So feel free to check out our blog, our website on the banks, and all those links you can get to from the back of the handout. Anything we digitize that's related to the history of the university, we put out there for everybody to watch or view or read.
So we've talked about our 2 stops, so now we're going to move on to the next one.
But it's another one.
He wanted to be a farmer, so he came here, and his grandma had a farm.
Stuff from Motor Wheel Corporation. Yay! Say that louder.
I've never noticed this.
Yay! This is our whole reason for doing this tour. Thank you so much. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is.
Who would have drunk out of this?
Horses. Yeah.
Horses.
So we've come to this very large object that seems to be in a really awkward place. It kind of is now, but at the time it was not. So I'm going to talk about the class gifts of 1900. There were more than just one. So the class of 1900 decided to follow in the steps of the class of 1873, who donated their rock. They wanted to donate their own rock. So they did that. They donated their own rock, and it was placed near the current music building within this, down the part of the circle. During this time, there was a competition between the juniors and the senior class to publish the first Wolverine yearbook. Yes, our yearbook was called the Wolverine. It was called that from 1900 to 1975, and now it is called the Red Cedar Log. It has nothing to do with U of M. It was a state animal. So the juniors won this competition. They got the yearbook done. So the seniors stole 75 copies of the book. To retaliate, the juniors buried this very large stone and they marked it with the plaque that read 00 Stone Dead. And they're like holding like a memorial pose ceremony for it. I'm just impressed that they dug it, put it back in the ground. But then the seniors, they dug it back up. They put it right. But then an unknown person built a rock. They built a fire and they set the stone ablaze. I'm not a geologist, but when they threw the water on it, it shattered this rock into pieces. So I don't know. Again, I'm not a geologist, but it literally was destroyed.
Behold, chemistry major.
Yes. No person was ever charged with destroying the stone. So a couple years later, in 1904, the class of 1900 donated this white sandstone drinking fountain. And I just love it. It's so unique because it's meant as a drinking fountain for the horses and the people on this side.
We have to walk around.
And it makes, like, you look at it now, it makes no sense of why it's placed here, but you have to remember at the time there was a road on this part that looped in front of Linton Hall, and then the sidewalk was on the other side of the drinking fountain. So it made complete sense. But then eventually they removed the road, the drinking fountain got turned off, and now it's just in a really awkward place.
Because they're not moving this.
No. And so we do have in our collections Irma Thompson, and she was one of the 1900 graduates. And she's, in her memoirs, she wrote that the story of the yearbooks was told time and again, and she didn't want to talk about it anymore. She married a 1901 graduate, and she never told him what happened to those 75 yearbooks. So unfortunately, I don't think we will ever know what happened to those copies of the yearbooks. So if you do want to walk around this before we continue on, you can just see the trough side, and then the drinking fountain used to have like a lion's head in it, but it's no longer there.
With the yearbooks.
Yeah.
What was the water source?
I don't know.
I will add that this time period, class rivalries were a big feature of campus life. There were rivalries between the freshman class and the sophomore class, and the posters they created. We've digitized quite a number of them. They're pretty serious posters. You know, there were, things that freshmen had to do, and if, the sophomores caught them without their little beanies on, there was hell to pay. And actually we have a little, if you go to our On the Banks website and just Google Forest Acres, somebody wrote up a reminiscence of the short and happy college career of Forest Acres, and he talks about being in downtown Lansing without his beanie on, and the sophomores, saw him, and it was a good thing he had long legs. And so the rivalries were a big feature at that time. And one of the things that I always like to keep in mind is that 18 to 22-year-olds are 18 to 22-year-olds in any period of time. They're young, they have lots of energy, they, like to have fun, they're, fairly irresponsible. A time in your life when you can be irresponsible if you're going to be. So, it's fun to find these stories and share them. And so there's also a photo when I talked about the class of 1900 and the 23 graduates. If you look at the photo, all 23 of them are in the picture with this fountain. So here we are across the street from the MSU Union, and we stopped here because there's shade. I'm sure some of you heard when Jennie and I were practicing our talk, it was 90 degrees. It was those really hot days when we started practicing this, so it was like, we're going to need to plot out all the shady spots to stop at. Okay, so you heard just a bit ago about the plans to turn College Hall into a union. But those plans had to be abandoned when the building collapsed. So campus leaders and alumni were interested in having a social and community center for students, faculty, alumni, and friends. And by this time period, there are now a critical mass of alumni. You know, it took a little while. The first graduating class was only 7 members. So, you know, now, the turn of the 20th century, we're getting enough alumni, and there's enough of the feeling for this space, and with fondness. You know, a lot of alumni, I won't say all alumni, but you know, you do have pleasant memories and funny memories along with the horrifying. All right, here's another question. How many of you had dreams that you missed a final or you missed a class after you graduated? Mine finally stopped. My husband's continue, but yeah. So even if you don't, you know, think, oh well, you don't have nostalgia. Some people apparently don't have it. It still comes back in your dreams. So anyway, after World War I, MAC and many other colleges and universities were looking for ways to commemorate those who died. They started having pledge drives to build the MAC Union Memorial Building. That was the original name. About $130,000 was pledged to start this building. They hired Pond & Pond, which was an architectural firm in Chicago, and they also did the Union down at the University of Michigan and at Purdue. They came in with an estimate of about $500,000 to build the Union, of which they did not have they didn't even have half of that. So the alumni secretary had an idea to hold what became known as Excavation Week. So on November 19th, 1923, they had the groundbreaking for the Union. 1,000 people showed up. So that will just tell you right there how much support there was to build a union on campus. So let me tell you a little bit about Excavation Week. It was the first of its kind in the nation, and it was to help defray the costs of building a union. It lasted 5 days from November 19th to the 24th, and they basically had the students dig the basement. Male students were divided into teams. Every morning they had to read the student newspaper and find out when their shift to dig was. There were morning shifts from 8 to noon and afternoon shifts from 1 to 5. The female students prepared the food. There are reports that 2,000 hot dogs were served in those 5 days. There were daily appearances of the varsity band and the Schwartz Creek band. They had competitions, there were prizes, the media was present, they had a thermometer gauge to chart the progress. So is any of this feeling like contemporary in a way, you know? So they had to make it fun, and it worked. They were able to lay the cornerstone of the Union in June of 1924, but then again the project stalled because they needed more money. Thankfully, there was an alumna in the state legislature by the name of A.C. McKinnon. He was in the class of 1895. He proposed a bill that would allow the state to invest its sinking funds into bonds, and then they had a bond drive. And they raised $300,000 and were able to finish the building. The building was dedicated, and it was called the Michigan State Union Memorial Building on June 12th, today's the 10th, 1925. So we are coming up on 100 years of the Union. And you'll notice the name of the university changed from Michigan Agricultural College to Michigan State College in May 13th, 1925. So the Union was a little bit different than it is now. The entrance at the time did face West Circle Drive, which it does now. It contained 11 dining rooms, 10 conference rooms, a 2-story assembly hall. There was a lounge for men and a lounge for women. There was a barbershop and a beauty parlor, and there was a billiards room and 16 guest rooms en suite. So if you had somebody come to visit you, they could just book a room at the Union. Now, the Union has had 4 additions since then. So it is kind of a higgledy-piggledy building, in my opinion. I know when I first started coming to campus, I would go in one door, walk around the building, and come out another door, and have to look around and be like, which way am I facing here? I don't think all the stairwells go to the same floors sometimes either. It's a little bit of a maze in there. I do think that it is poignant to remember that the building was built to commemorate students who died, most especially after this past semester when we had a student who was shot and killed in the Union on February 13th, that evening. I don't think a lot of people know that it was built to commemorate the deceased, but I think it's really important that we remember Brian today and the other students who were shot and killed in February of this year, because now we're all part of a club we didn't want to be part of, but here we are.
Okay, we are going to walk across the street and we're going to stop just over in the corner. We're going to talk about the split rock.
Yeah. Either we were at billiards or
I said it a few times and I didn't know.
Did the bowling alley close down too?
It's gone. Yeah, they did. The other one was too big.
We had programs out here before.
I was looking for So me and Susan kept joking. A running theme you will notice in this tour today is rocks and trees. There's more to come, and we're talking about our second stone here. So for the early MAC students, they would remember this rock that we are stopped by now, and it had 2 names, and they fit for 2 different reasons. It was called the halfway rock and or the split rock. So this rock was not found on campus. It was found on Michigan Avenue between the Capitol and the university. It was located almost halfway between the 2 places. And today it would have been located at what is Kipling Street near the Capitol Imaging. So this boulder was halfway distance, but then this boulder was also split in 2 by a cherry tree that was growing out of the middle of it. And the first students remember this tree being like the size of a person's arm. And before the tree died, it was almost a foot in diameter. So the tree grew and it slowly just kept pushing the boulder apart. The tree died around 1922 and it was cut down on January 17th, 1924. And it was a big deal. The tree was cut down like, oh my God, like it was a big deal. But then it got even bigger deal when the boulder was finally split up and taken apart. There was no need for the boulder there. It was in the way because they were going to widen the road. And that happened on November 25th, 1924. And that news spread like wildfire. People came out to see it. The secretary of the Board of Agriculture at the time, Herman Halliday, he actually went down to see can they stop the removal, and obviously he realized they couldn't happen, but he was able to secure a piece of the boulder that you see today over here. So the rock was brought to campus and a plaque was put on it, as you can see, and on the plaque is a poem that was written by a student from the class of 1862. So this rock was at least placed here by June 20th, 1925 for Alumni Day, because in the newspaper it said it was a big success. Everybody was taking pictures of the split rock. And believe it or not, the halfway rock was featured on in Ripley's Believe It or Not. So we are going to be moving from this area, we're going to cross the street and we're going to cut through the dormitories for our next stop.
Does anybody know what happened to the other half of the split rock?
I saw that it might have been used in some foundation for a house. I also read it was maybe used like in an archway of a house.
Part of it went to the Capitol.
Yes, another part, yes, thank you.
They marked, it was used as a slab for a plaque for a tree on the Capitol Square. And it's
Oh, we're actually going to cross at the corner. What a surprise. It's not like students.
Here we are. Jenny's going to give a talk here pretty quick. But what I want you to imagine is that none of these dorms are here. Okay? None of them. These were all built after 1929. So this row behind us on West Circle was called Faculty Row. And you can look on your maps to see where the homes of the faculty were. So I just wanted to try and clear your mind of these beautiful dorms, these beautiful old dorms. Post 1929. Actually, all right, so here's going to be plug number one. We wrote 2 books, one called Tales from the Archives 1 and Tales from the Archives 2. You can buy them on stores. It's on the back of your brochure. But in the second one, we do go into the history of like the dorms and their namesakes and when they're built and all that. And there are blog posts on our website as well.
Okay, so we are going to talk about something that I think very little people know about. We had a deer park on this campus. Okay. Yes, I know. Why? So the idea of a deer park began with Daniel Strange, and he was with the class of 1867, and he was the oldest alumni from 1931 to 1939. Back in the day, it was a big deal if you were the oldest alumni. Like, it really was, and you would get Professor Kedsey's cane you got to hold on to because you were the oldest member. But for whatever reason, Strange presented a gift of a deer to MSU President Gorton in 1895. He was so happy to accept this gift, but MEC needed to have an enclosure built first. So the deer was sent to Dexter, and it was supposed to be brought back to campus once the fence was built. That was in 1895. There's no mention about the deer park that I could find until November 1898 when the fence was being installed. And it was installed around the wood lot north of Professor Veal's residence and the part of the Arboretum. So what's nice is we got the sign up here and they actually laid out, you can see the deer park would have been kind of where this landing area is we just passed through, and it butted up to the Arboretum that Professor Beale planted in 1874. So these trees that are left is part of Professor Beale's Arboretum. There's a lot of trees that Professor Beale planted, so this is just one set of them. So in December 1898, a buck, a doe, a fawn, and 2 elk were brought up from Belle Isle Park in Detroit. We don't know what happened to the deer that Mr. Strange presented to MAC. With that, there's mention of the deer park, but it's very little, it's very scattered. We have a lot of pictures of the deer, but not too much about the deer. We do know that Mr. Simmons, who was helping to plan the campus, the layout, he said the park should be removed because the pond that for the deer was dirty and it was killing the trees. And then Professor Beale was not pleased about the deer being brought because he said the deer are going to eat at the base of his trees. And he was correct. There's a picture of the deer eating at the base of the trees. And then we are going to introduce you to one of our other characters to talk about, Lemoyne Snyder. He was the son of MAC President Jonathan Snyder. He was born on this campus. He grew up on this campus. And he went on to have his own distinguished career in life. But in his memoirs, he talked about one of a professor's wives wasn't feeling well. The bull elk was doing its mating call, keeping her up at night. She apparently had enough clout to say, "I'm done. We have to move the elk." So men went out in the night. They were going to wrangle up this elk and remove it. I don't know where, but take it away from the deer park. Well, the deer got scared and the elk, and they stampeded, and this elk fell over and had a heart attack and died. And I don't think that was their intention, but that was the outcome. But this elk had a beautiful set of antlers. So Lemoyne said it became a beautiful hat rack that lived in the president's house. So there were many deer and elk in the many pictures we have, but by 1913, only 3 deer remained. In the November 1915 Board of Trustee meeting minutes, they authorized the fence to be removed. So for 16 years, we had a deer park. And the thing I just find interesting is I couldn't find any research to say, like, did they study the animals? Did students go sketch the deer? There's just nothing about what was the point of the deer park beyond we have a deer park. So this is the deer park and more trees, and we'll be talking about more trees coming up. We are going to walk over to the grove next.
They probably will, and then they'll put $1 million into
Seen them been digging over in this area, and they just rediscovered the foundation for the little astronomy tower that we had on campus. So that will be coming up in the news soon if it hasn't yet. So I just wanted to stop and point out that this little building was right over here.
What time period was that the astronomy building was there?
Late 1880s to at least 1915.
It was just how they.
Who was Terry on the basketball team? Terry on that same team.
Around in the summertime only, because it's just such a beautiful place. But
These porches are beautiful. There are quotes above the doors. I will leave them for you to find them on your own. But there's art, there's sculpture, there's fountains. They're just really quite beautiful. And of course, IPF keeps the gardens and the flowers just really, really beautiful all year long. It's a little crispy now, but you can just, enjoy it. So on we go.
Oh, he lives there, yeah. It's funny, that's my favorite part.
What do you think, Terry?
Hey, Joe. Pretty impressive.
Have you seen it before?
I haven't. This is new to me.
Yep. I literally discovered this in 2019, just before the 100th anniversary. Yeah, I didn't know about it either. Yep. Father who died in the Great War.
World War I Memorial.
Great War, as they called it. Yeah.
How about another Go Green?
Go away!
Yeah, I love it. Okay, we are now at the Memorial Grove. No doubt you've driven past this many times without realizing what is here. There are 33 oak trees planted here for each student and alumna who fought and died during World War I. The Grove was a project of the Department of Forestry and was led by faculty chair Professor Alfred Chittenden. Dedication was held on June 12, 1919. It was supposed to be on June 11th, which is actually on the plaque, but it rained, so they postponed it a day. Lieutenant Colonel August Gansner dedicated the monument. His entire speech was reprinted in the MAC record. You can go to our On the Banks website and you can read it. One of the names on the list from the class of 1916 is F.I. Lanky. So I want to tell you a little bit about F.I. Lanky. Francis Irving Lanky was born in 1894 in Bay City, and he was an engineering major. He was a member of the Scabbard and Blade, which was the military honorary. He was a member of the Engineering Society and the Inter-Society Union. He was an avid piano player and yell master. So yell master in today's parlance is cheerleader. And there were no female cheerleaders back then. They were all boys. He and his roommate Arthur Sales wrote our fight song. Francis Lanky did the music and Arthur Sales did the lyrics. Now, a former roommate of Lanky's tells this following tale. A girlfriend of Lanky's, and apparently there were quite a few. Again, remember I told you about those 18 to 22-year-olds. All right, so a former girlfriend of Lanky's, her name was Claudice Kober. She took that fight song and had it copywritten. Smart girl. Cost her $90. That's not a small, not a small amount of money. This was in 1919. She got this copywritten. A group of football players printed it off and sold them for 50 cents a piece at a pep rally. They sold all 770 copies in a half an hour. Claudice was supposed to take her $90 and give the rest to the varsity club, but she did not. So she was smart but slightly unethical. We have a picture of her though, so that will rotate here. The new band director loved this fight song, and in 1920 it was played at all the football games. So that is the beginning of our fight song. All right, after graduation, Francis Lanky took a job with the state of Michigan as a safety engineer. He also served in the military, and unfortunately, he was killed in an airplane accident May 1st, 1919, while he was stationed in Florida. So, even though the lyrics have changed some over time, I think you will recognize the fight song. So I think we should give it a go and sing it. Let me just get my lyrics out here a minute. It's
this version or the new version?
This is the same with these lyrics. We're going to sing. Jacob, Rebecca. All right, are you ready?
Sure.
On the banks of the Red Cedar, there's a college known to all. Their specialty is farming, but those farmers play football. Yankee teams are never beaten. All through the game they fight. Fight for the only colors, green and white. Smash right through that line of blue. Watch the score keep growing. Aggie teams are sure to win. They're fighting with a vim. Rah, rah, rah. Hey, their line is we. We're going to win this game. Fight, fight, raw team fight. Victory for MAC. Yay! Thank you. So it's the same song. And Rebecca tells me that during the Michigan game, they do sing the smash right through that line of blue. Now I'm tired. So, this is the Grove.
So before we talk about our next story, that's the main highlight, we need to set the stage first. So this part of West Circle that goes down, this used to be called Faculty Row, and this is where the president and some of the professors lived on campus. This gets confusing, so not to be confused with Cowles House, which is down the road here and is the residence of the MSU president, if they choose to live in it. The home we are going to talk about is the president's house, and it was the residence of the president from 1874 to 1915. It was a 3-story home in the style of Second Empire architecture. I hope I had that correct. The home is similar to, in the vein of the Addams Family, the Munsters. Yep. So just to give you an idea, that's kind of how this house looked. And I had mentioned earlier at the Deer Park about Lemoyne Snyder. This is the house that he grew up in as a boy. So it was Faculty Row number 1, and the home would have been right in this area, and it was across street from the drill field. What name do you guys remember this field being called?
Anybody called Landon Field? Raise your hand. Yeah, Landon. Field.
Okay.
Adams Field.
Yeah. Many names over the years. So this house was raised in 1946 to make room for what is in front of us now, Gilchrest Hall. Another feature I did want to point out that you really don't see from this point of view unless you're over on this side is the bluffs. In the bluffs, when you're on the other side of the river, you can see the steep embankment going up from the river. And Lemoyne said in his memoirs, him and the kids would terrify their parents when they were playing baseball, and if the ball went over, they would go scrambling after it. And even at that time, a fence was installed to make sure nothing happened, and as you can still see, this part is still very fenced off because it is a steep part, and it's just, you drive on it, you don't realize it until you're on the other side over in the baseball field. Okay, so the stage has been set. Our story is going to take a round right in this area. So in 1907, MEC was celebrating its 50th anniversary. And for you that are much quicker at math than I am, you'll realize 50th. I mean, for 1907, our establishment was 1855. What gives? Well, we originally had it set at the 1857 date when classes started, which was 2 years after we were established. But then we changed it back to 1855 because that means we are the first land grant institution in the country.
Penn State by 3 weeks.
Yes.
Go green,
Go white. So MAC President Jonathan Snyder, he wanted to make a big deal out of this celebration. So he took his son Lemoyne and they traveled to Washington, D.C. to personally invite U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt to ask if he would give the commencement address, and he gladly agreed to it. So Teddy came to Lansing by train on May 31st, 1907, and he met with the Michigan legislature and the governor on arrival. From there, Teddy was then driven to campus in a Rio automobile, driven by its inventor, Ransom E. Olds, and in the picture that we have going passed around, you can see Teddy and Jonathan sitting in the back seat. Ransom is driving the car, and next to Ransom is Theodore Roosevelt's secretary, Loeb. So when they arrived on campus, Teddy attended a 5-course luncheon at the president's house. And it was anywhere from 35 guests to 135 guests. The numbers did not match many of the different sources I looked at. After lunch, Teddy gave an hour and 15-minute commencement address, and he presented diplomas to 96 graduates, and one of those graduates was Myrtle Craig, and she was our first African-American woman to graduate from MAC. And in between all of this busy, busy day, a tree was planted. Wait, what? Which one? So to commemorate this, celebration, an elm tree was planted between the president's house and the house next to it, another professor's house. So this spot was selected because mainly it was for Teddy's safety. A guarded corridor went from the front of the house at the steps all the way down to the commencement platform. After that, after the tree was planted and Teddy left, Lemoyne said it was his job for several years to water the tree, and he had to carry 10 buckets of water once a week to the tree. And during this time, the tree thrived, but it was unknown. People didn't know about it. And part of it was the administration didn't want a plaque or make a big deal about it because they're afraid the tree would get vandalized. But finally, that was rectified on a cold, drizzly homecoming on November 13th, 1937. MSC President Robert Shaw formally dedicated the Roosevelt Elm, and a plaque was placed by the Forestry Club. And in one of the other pictures I have in the dedication, you can see the president's house right in the background. So it really was just planted here for ease of convenience and safety. Unfortunately, though, you won't find the tree on campus anymore. Due to the influx of students coming in after World War II, it was decided the tree had to be moved to make room for Gilchrest Hall. They didn't want to just cut it down. They thought they would transplant it. It was dragged 200 feet across the street with a tractor in 1945, but unfortunately the tree couldn't thrive with the move. So in the fall of 1947, it was cut down. There were various cross sections of this tree. When the cutting was happening, Professor Malcolm Trout went by and, oh, what's happening? Oh, can I have a piece of the tree? So people stopped, got pieces of the tree. And the archives actually has the cross section that was given to President Hanna. And it's a very nice piece, and people do request to see it. So it is another story of a tree, no longer here on campus.
And here comes Forest Acres again. During Teddy Roosevelt's commencement speech, there was a massive explosion behind the engineering building. It is reported that a powder keg was lit. And guess who got the blame? Forrest got the blame, although his whole entire life he denied that was one prank that he did not actually commit. Between that, and so this is strike two. No Beaumont Tower chimes, but a radio. In April of 1908, President Jonathan Snyder sent a letter to Forrest's father asking him to withdraw Forrest, citing his poor grades. Third strike, Forrest is out. But that is not the end of Forrest's story here at MSU. When he left, he got a job selling farm machinery for the Oliver Corporation until 1917. He then worked at REO Motor Car Company. In the 1920s, he joined Dodge. He became a vice president at Dodge in 1938, and he retired from Dodge in 1947. When he retired, several hundred Dodge dealers across the country donated money to give to Forrest to establish a scholarship here. They collected $45,000. In today's money, that would be $600,000. And I think that's pretty indicative of the person he was. He was obviously well-liked. He was known as Mr. MSU. He was on the Board of Trustees here from 1939 to 1957. He donated money for the golf courses here, which I'm sure people now think, oh, Forest Acres, what a sweet name for a golf course, not realizing it was a real person. The residence hall that my office and Jennie's office looks out on, and we watch students running for the bus all year long, is Acres Hall, was named in his honor in 1964. The Forest Acres Trust has provided $14 million over the last 5 decades across campus. Later in life, he was praised by a roommate for all that he had done for his alma mater. And Forrest's quote was, I did enough damage while I was there. In the end, his legacy, I think, outshines the damage that he did, and really does make for a lot of fun stories. So even if, oh, and I did forget, he was awarded an honorary degree 50 years after his leaving by President Hanna. So in 1958, he did get his degree. And we have photos of a lot of these events. We actually have his collection of papers and in our collections as well. Let me tell you just a little bit about Lemoyne Snyder, the son of Jonathan Snyder. Lemoyne got a medical degree and also became an attorney. He was a physician at Sparrow Hospital. He was a medico-legal director for the state police for 15 years. And again, this next bit comes out of a reference question that I got from a film studies professor at UCLA. He and Earl Stanley Gardner, how many of you know what he wrote? He wrote Perry Mason. They had a TV show in the late 50s called The Court of Last Resort. And because he was a forensic medicine expert, and it was kind of like what today we have the Innocent Project. So it was like they'd look into cases of people who were in jail and on death row and that had claimed that they were innocent. So they had this TV show on, I think it was on NBC and ABC through the late 50s. So, and then if you've ever been on jury duty in Mason and served on a jury, when you go back to the room to deliberate, there's a picture of Jonathan Snyder's other son, Plumber Snyder. So, hence the tentacles, people, the tentacles.
You have a collection of Earl Stanley Gardner material, don't you?
We do our special collections.
We have the court of last resort.
We have the court of last resort records.
Yeah.
We also have forensic materials from the time that Lemoyne was working at Sparrow, which there's a lot of very graphic photographs because they're from murder scenes. Ward Giltner Hall, his daughter was actually shot and killed by her best friend the night before she got married, and we have her autopsy results. Yeah, creepy, but yeah. But we get reference questions. So, this is not in the timeline, but because we like trees and rocks, we wanted to bring you to this white pine tree, which there is a marker on it, and there is a QR code that you can scan with your phones, which will take you directly to the campus tree map that's on the back of the handout. This tree was planted by MAC President Theophilus Abbott in celebration of the birth of his daughter, Mary, in June of 1863. She was born in January, and he also planted a tree. Listen to the band, isn't that nice? He also planted a tree for his son, but we haven't been able to locate that one. Anyway, so this tree was planted in 1863. Mary was also married here in August of 1889, and she was married by another MAC president, Oscar Clute. Theophilus Abbott lived here at Cowles House from 1862 to 1874 and then moved to the new president's house, which Jenny just told you about. So anyway, thanks for coming today. Thank you, Bill, and the Historical Society of Greater Lansing. Please email us with questions.
We have
our
bookmarks.
Oh, we have Tales bookmarks from our books. Rebecca, if you want to show, our 2 little Tales books are available for sale on the website. They're fun little books, lots of good stories, lots of art, lots of photos. What handout? Oh, if you need a program, holler, come up and see us.
We don't have any more.
Oh, we don't have any more?
Yeah.
We ran out. We printed 80. You guys are awesome. Just email us. Susan O'Brien, Jennie Rankin, archives@msu.edu. Can't really be much easier than that. And Bill wants to talk, and we'll be around for a little while.
I just want to say a few words. The primary words I want to say is thank you for this incredible tour. I went to MSU for innumerable years, and a lot of these sites I'd never seen before. And I think every one of us who now that walks across that what we call the sacred space is got a different feeling than they had maybe just a year ago.